7 Secrets of the Goddess by Devdutt Pattanaik. Chapter 7, Vitthai's Secret. Affection Dissolves Boundaries. Part 2. From the 7th century onwards, a new religion gained a foothold in India, Islam. It came via trade in the south and via warlords in the north. Like Christianity, it was a monotheistic religion where God was masculine, his prophet was masculine, and women had a clearly defined inferior position. Islam frowned upon idol worship, and its followers could not understand the use of song, dance, and theatre in worship. As Muslim warlords gradually became the rulers of North and East India, Hinduism had to redefine itself once more. Both for internal reasons, rejection of the excessive sensuality of temple Devdasis, as well as external reasons, arrival of Islam. From the 10th century onwards, we see a gradual rejection of all things sensual and feminine. This is evident in the popular ballads of the Nath yogis, vernacular of the Sanskrit yogis, followers of Nath and Gorakhnath, who are always in confrontation with sensuous tantric sorceresses called yoginis who get their power through sex. Far removed from the sensuous temple culture, the Nath yogis were wandering ascetics who attributed their power to celibacy. Some yogis even destroyed their genitals, which ensures the semen does not slip out of their body, but instead rises up towards their head. In Tantra, this is called urdhvaretas, the upward flow of semen that grants them powers known as siddhi, by which men have the power to fly through the sky, walk on water, give fertility to the land and children to the childless. The acquisition of siddhi turned the Nath yogis into siddhas, powerful men who had no time to waste on sensory, worldly pleasures. The attitude of the Nath yogi tradition towards celibacy is very different from that in Buddhist times. In Buddhist tradition, it was more about the conquest of desire. In Nath tradition, it is about the rejection of all things feminine. The Nath yogis' hyper-masculinity did not come from dominating women. It came from turning away from women altogether. Femininity was seen as stripping men of their masculinity. Nath was born a fish, but he overheard the secret conversation between Shiva and Shakti, during which Shiva revealed the mysteries of Vedas and the Tantras to Parvati. That knowledge had transformed him into a human male with enough siddhi power to enter the banana grove unharmed. He entered this land of women and stayed there, enchanted by the women, unable to return. He had to be rescued by his student, Gorakhnath. Even the story of the great Vedanta teacher Shankara has these elements when challenged about his knowledge of the erotic arts by Ubhaya Bharati, wife of Mandana Mishra. Since he is a celibate ascetic, Shankara knows nothing, so he resurrects a dead king, Amaru, by entering his body at the moment of his death and then going on to experience sensuary pleasures in the inner quarters of the palace with queens and courtesans for several months. Unlike Nath, however, Shankara does not succumb to the pleasures of the flesh and eventually leaves the king's body and returns to being an ascetic, thus establishing the superiority of his mind over his flesh. Alongside violent Muslim warlords came the poet saints, known as Sufis, from Persia. With them came music and the idea of love for God expressed in passionate, even romantic terms. Hindus connected with this idea, and it amplified the bhakti or devotional movement. The idea of devotion is found in the Bhagavad Gita, written centuries before the rise of Islam. Tamil songs of Alvars and Nayanars that speak of devotion to Vishnu and Shiva predate the arrival of Islam into India. But the tone of devotion here is one of surrender. The arrival of Sufism made devotion more romantic. It also encouraged the expression of devotion through regional literature. Indian poets took the idea of romantic attachment for the divine to another level through the idea of Radha. Krishna had always been associated with milkmaids who yearn for him. But in the songs of the poet saints, Krishna also pines for Radha, and Radha demands and gets Krishna's attention. It is no longer about submission. It is now about mutual longing. The devotee who becomes a woman a maid, a servant, even a wife and a queen who God indulges with affection. Those who could not handle the romantic and the sensual turned to the parental. But it was not always God who was the parent. The devotee could be parent too, Yashoda to Krishna and Kaushalya to Ram. Most early bhakti songs were directed at Vishnu and Shiva. Later bhakti songs are directed at the goddess too. Shama Sangeet in Bengal and the Jagrata song sung all night for the pleasure of Sheravali in Punjab and Jammu, for example. The relationship here is never romantic, it is always parental. Here the goddess is mostly mother. At times she appears like a daughter, virginal and powerful, rarely mischievous and playful. In Sri Vaishnavism, strongly influenced by teachings of Ramanuja, the 12th century Vedantic scholar who turned away from married life and became a monk, Shri or Lakshmi is the mother who the devotee approaches so that she negotiates with the stern father, Vishnu. In Sufi songs, God is decidedly male, and the male singer-devotee does not shy away from making himself feminine. In bhakti literature, this gender shifting extends to God. Love for the devotee turns the masculine into feminine and the feminine into masculine. In Trichy, Tamil Nadu, Shiva turns into a midwife in order to help deliver the child of a devotee whose mother is unable to reach her house in time. In Mathura, Shiva turns into a Gopeshwara, a milkmaid, who wants to join Krishna in his Ras Leela. Krishna exchanges clothes with Radha to experience what it means to be Radha. And in imagery found on temple walls of Orissa, he does not mind sporting a woman's plait and anklets. In his Nath Dwara temple in Rajasthan, he indulges in Strivesha, or cross-dressing, in memory of his mother and his beloved, unafraid that such activities will undermine his masculinity. There is an oral tradition in Bengal that a time came when Kali's violence became so excessive that the world lost its balance. She had to be stopped. So Shiva lay on his back, on the ground, in her path. As soon as she stepped on him, she was so enchanted by his beauty that her strident march came to a halt and she decided to make love to him, with her on top. With this, the balance of the world was restored and the earth regenerated itself. But then, the Asuras returned. The Devas begged Kali to come to their rescue and rid the earth of Asuras. But Kali was so full of love that she could not resume her violence. So, she decided to take another form, that of Krishna. From female, she became male. Shiva could not bear the thought of being without Kali, so he decided to follow Krishna as Radha. Krishna was as dark as Kali, and Radha was as fair as Shiva. Kali had sat on top of Shiva, and so Krishna allowed Radha to sit on top of him. Thus their respective gender and positions were reversed. Krishna was Kali, Shiva was Radha. They were not two, but one. By worshipping Krishna then, one did not exclude Kali, and by worshipping Radha, one did not exclude Shiva. The gender fluidity of the narrative seeks to unite Vaishnava, Shaiva, and Shakta orders. It allows for negotiations and interactions between the vegetarian Krishna cults and the non-vegetarian Kali cults. It also unites the ascetic Shaiva traditions with the sensuous Radha traditions. When there is wisdom, there is affection. When there is affection, there is no fear of predators, hence no need for boundaries. Rigidity then gives way to fluidity. God becomes goddess and goddess, God. In the 16th century, Europeans came to India as traders. By the 18th century, they had complete control over the subcontinent, turning this land into a source of taxes as well as raw materials for their industries back home. The Europeans had Christian roots and saw themselves as children of the Enlightenment who came with a scientific temperament. They mocked Hindus for being so effeminate and described Hinduism as paganism as they worshipped the goddess. Hindus reacted by masculinizing themselves, distancing themselves from all things sensual, and redefining the goddess in virginal and maternal terms, just like the biblical Mary. All things Hindu were seen as foul. So rather than reform Devdasi traditions of their exploitative side, they were simply wiped out. and all dance and song sanitized. Freedom fighters projected themselves as celibate monks, more determined to save Mother India as yogis. They refused to be seen as rasiks and bhogis who enjoy art and pleasure. The impact of the European Orientalist gaze was so powerful that it continues to haunt modern political Hinduism, where leaders are especially respected if they are celibate. Posters have been created of Ram without Sita and Shiva without Gauri, both sporting firm, muscular bodies with determined expressions and no trace of feminine softness. Durga, the protective mother who rides lions and does battle, has become the preferred form of the goddess, not Kamakshi, who sits on Shiva holding the symbols of Kama, god of desire, or the restless, whimsical Lakshmi. The 20th century saw the rise of American academia. It had two powerful influences. One was the Protestant rejection of Catholic feudalism, even though it still remained masculine and monotheistic at its core. The other was scientific thinking that rejected all matters of faith. It established a new Orientalist lens that started explaining Hinduism through the lens of fairness and justice, where it positioned the researcher as the savior and the research subject either as villain or victim. Suddenly, the Ramayana and Mahabharata became patriarchal epics. The differences between many Ramayans were more valued than the commonalities. The Ram of devotees was no longer the gentle god, but the stern imperialist, a wife-abusing villain. And Sita became his whimpering silent victim, stripped of her goddess status. This reading was reinforced when Ram became the mascot of Hindu fundamentalism. Shiva was admired as the rule breaker who allows the wild Kali to stand on his chest, while Vishnu was frowned upon because he makes Lakshmi a subservient consort who has to massage his feet. This literal and rather rudimentary reading, shaped by Western ideologies and templates, continues to have a huge impact on young students who go to American universities to pursue studies in humanities and liberal arts. It endorses the Western imagination that there is nothing redeeming about India. It is essentially chaos where order has to be brought in from outside. Its many hierarchies have to be replaced by equality, and it is desperately in need of a Western-style revolution. The goddess smiles. It is in the nature of the beast to compete and dominate. Like young lions who challenge old ones, like dogs who bark at strangers, every society mocks older alien cultures. The West is no different, despite the veneer of rationality and science. And like animals who do not recognize themselves in the mirror, societies often fail to see themselves as others see them. India is no different when they turn chauvinistic. Vitthai asks, what is wrong with gods being feminine and men effeminate? Why should women be like men? Why should there be a race that someone has to win? Why can't people be themselves? The nature of man cannot be domesticated by rules that enforce fairness and justice. Such rules will only suppress and eventually provoke the beast within humanity to strike back, defy, and subvert the very same laws. For what starts as a tool to create equality invariably ends up as a tool that establishes new hierarchies. The goddess has seen it before, and she will see it again. As long as Brahma seeks to control nature, he will find himself being beheaded by Shiva. As long as Indra believes he is entitled to Lakshmi, he will always wonder why she is drawn to Vishnu. The point is not about domesticating the goddess outside us. The point is to evoke the god within us. It is not about being righteous, about proving the validity of one god or one truth. It is about expanding the mind so that we can affectionately include multiple truths. And that can only happen when we appreciate the idea that is goddess, hence God, without the bias of gender.
7 Secrets from Hindu Calendar Art by Devdutt Pattanaik.
7 Secrets of the Goddess by Devdutt Pattanaik.